I made a section in the doc. You can sign in. The link in case you don't have it readily accessible. And I know we have an agenda for this meeting because we said it yesterday. Let me see if it's in the team thing. Yes, here it is. I'm gonna remove these future topics that I added, which may not be relevant anymore. Should we get started? We're 8 past now. I'm going to run this one. Let's put the standing items first. Did we start the live stream? Show.
Yep, it started.
Cool. All right. Please sign in. Do we have any new faces? Recognize the faces that I see. All right. I guess we can jump right into the agenda. Do we do updates in this meeting? No, I forgot.
No, not anymore. We did them yesterday.
All right, great. All right, so then we can jump into the NVARS RFC, which I think was prompted, Sam's not here, but I think was prompted by a question that I had yesterday. I'm good with this proposal. I recall that Emily was asking if there was a way that we could sort of standardize the way that the platform directory and the CNB end directory and the build packs end directory all worked, with like default being the default. And there was a question about the ordering. I'm not trying to make this more difficult, so I'm totally fine to just say we don't have to do this now. But I was just curious about what for future, right? Like, what was it about that idea that made it difficult? And yeah, that's all. I don't know if we can't answer that question without Sam or Emily, then I'm happy to just sit on it and ask later.
Yeah, I think Emily's question's a fair question. I think similar to the caching other stuff, it's just we are doing things in more than one place. I think Javier asked this question in the RFC directly, to some degree, with like how important is portability in the image, and that we can't like leverage the same directory. And so I don't know if there's a way to kind of do it with how we have kind of stood up some of the other stuff before, while still hitting either things Sam wants out of portability in those things, and or kind of changing the existing structure and spec to kind of maybe account for that stuff.
Yeah, I think it would look like if there was a way to sort of get in a session, a working session, to try to sort of re-architect more than just the solution, but also the other solutions in which we have environment variables. So I think like that's pretty challenging. And I don't know that there was a huge appetite to go down that route. So I think it was just a wishful thinking sort of comment. I'm not sure that it was something that was truly blocking.
I could be like, I'm a little fuzzy in my understanding, but I thought that the platform directory is applied after the build packs modifications, right? And the default behavior is override, right? Is that correct? Would it be crazy to change the default behavior to be default just to align it with the builder behavior? I'm sorry if you can't hear me over my daughter.
I personally hear you pretty clear. I don't know the answer to that, right? I don't know if it's spelled out anywhere. I haven't seen the RFC since the last time I saw it, but like it would be nice to sort of see how the order of precedence, works along with the different, I guess, what are the like prefixes? No, suffixes, right? And maybe some very concrete examples on that, because I think it requires a little bit more thinking through, at least for me.
I think Sam did give some examples, but they don't include the build packs part. So like that's why it's still a little fuzzy, but I can leave a comment on the RFC just asking for that clarity. It kind of sounds like I'm the only one interested in this topic, but I'm happy to move on if there's no other rule.
I mean, if you want to dig into it, I think it's fine. Maybe Aiden has some insight from hanging out with Sam, but
I don't think I have any insight beyond what's in the RFC. Yeah, I'm just trying to remember. So we use a precursor to this internally, and I think I might have said before, some of the reasons that we use a mechanism like this is because we want to set some environmental variables like the pip registry settings and the npm registry settings, and we want to be able to set them in one place and have them applied to, in some cases, a bunch of different stacks, because they all just pull in the builder config, and yeah, I think that's where it came out of, and we think it might be more widely useful than that. But more insight into Sambav's mind, I'm afraid, is not something that I can provide.
I'm gonna leave my comments on the RFC because I think that's probably where he's most likely to see them and respond. It's just a question at this point. I don't think, I mean, I'm not, as I said, I'm not trying to make this more difficult or introduce new requirements. Should we move on? We have one more item on the agenda, I believe, RFC process. We don't have Emily, the author of that RFC. I recall, Joe, I think you said there was one section that was empty and it would be nice to fill it in.
Yeah, I think the implementation section is empty. We were talking about whether it actually needed to be filled out, because I think most of the RFC actually talks about it, but Emily said she wanted to look at, I think the process of actually updating the instruction doc that's in the repo. I mean, I'm ready to approve it. I just felt like I was going to wait and see what happened there. If we decide we don't want to fill that out at this point, I'm fine. I think it's important that we move it forward. So maybe, I don't know if Emily's going to be here, but like we could sort of time box it and say if we don't get to it, then we just review it as is.
Is there also a thought of should someone take this over? If, like, I guess that's the alternative, right?
I brought that up yesterday Because Emily was at the leadership meeting yesterday and she said she was gonna do it,
Okay.
so.
Okay.
Joe, as I recall, you also said that you wanted to maybe turn this into a slightly working section of the meeting that might force us to read through parts of it. Is that still
Yeah.
on the cards?
We could do that. I was kind of saying that with assuming Emily would be here. But yeah, I was gonna say we could actually take some, 15 minutes here, everybody read through it. If we need to make updates, we make updates and we kind of drive it through in this meeting. I think that's the last agenda item, so maybe we first check if anybody has anything else and then we can try that. Okay, yeah, if nobody else has other topics, I'd say we just set a clock and then come back at that time. If there are no objections, I'd say let's come back at 9:35 or 35 after the hour. That's on okay.
We go away and read the document and come back with our suggestions.
Yeah.
I mean, you can also just turn your video off or whatever too, or.
Cool.
Hey, Terence, I see what you're asking there. But the call for votes still say that this call for votes should be something that happens at the end of the consensus process. So if we're in a situation where the team lead and the steward are different people and they differ on their opinions on the call for votes, then I think we're in a situation we don't want to be in already. I'm not sure any kind of process like this is going to solve it.
Yeah, I guess I was confused because of the definitions of steward and team leads when I was first reading definitions. It seems like if the steward is the one driving the RFC, whether it's a team or project level, they should probably be the one to call for votes. And if, like on a project level, the team lead and the steward differ in that case, then they can vote differently, right? At that point, and that seems like you would figure out very quickly whether you're on the same page or not. In the case of a project, the steward and team lead is the same person, right? So I hope they would not differ on their opinion.
It depends on before coffee or after coffee, doesn't it?
Probably, but one would hope you would make those decisions at the same time, same state of mind.
So in call for votes, you would like the word team leads changed to steward.
I think that makes sense to me. If it doesn't make sense to other people, that's fine too.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Yeah. So a call for vote says that when a RFC is deemed ready by a team lead, that team lead initiates the voting process with a call for votes. At this point, the RFC is closed to modification. In my mind, if the steward isn't the team lead, it is the case that the steward does have to shepherd the team leader, convince them that this RFC is ready for votes, and then the team lead calls for the vote. So I'm happy with that being phrased either way, frankly. But it should be a very unlikely scenario where the steward can't convince the team lead that, or build consensus with the team lead that a vote is appropriate at this time. So, Terence, do you feel like we need to propose a change to the wording here?
I mean, it's fine out of the way, but
Is this the definition of lazy consensus, that neither of us wants to change the word, so therefore, because we're too lazy, there is consensus?
maybe. I might just put a comment on the RFC asking and get Emily to chime in on her
Okay.
thoughts. I don't know if other people have thoughts as well. It sounds like you don't feel strongly one way or another.
I really don't. I think, yeah, I'm more interested in. It sounds like you don't feel particularly strongly about it one way or the other, Terence. You just want to see if Emily comments on it.
Yeah, I mean, I potentially, I think maybe we talked about team leads at one point, kind of doing that. But I guess now rereading him, it to my mind, like if the steward's doing all the work, like it seems like they should also be the ones who make the call. And for project RFCs, that is basically the same person, anyways, right? Like, for project RFCs, it's like the steward does all the work to shepherd a thing through, and then they're also the ones who make the call. So when it comes down to project RFC or team RFCs, then I feel like it then separates that responsibility, which feels a little weird to me. But you know, I mean, in practice, it probably doesn't actually make that much of a difference because you probably have to convince the team lead anyways, like you're saying. So maybe you're splitting hairs a bit, but I think maybe it's a bit cleaner unless we feel very strongly that like it should be the team lead's responsibility every time to kind of make that call.
Cool. I'm happy one way or the other. So if you want to propose a wording, then we'll run it by Emily and hopefully get this to bed. Juan, you've had another suggestion. You're wondering who may reopen the RFC. Is
I
this
mean,
something that we need to spec in this RFC, or is it out of scope? Or
I mean, if this is a process that anyone can read and follow, for me, it should be clear who is responsible for one thing or the other, right? So it says that, okay, it may be reopened, but for me, it will be clear if it says who can reopen the issue, and if it's the author of the same stuff that probably needs to do it, then I mean, all the pieces should be clear, right? If I go through the whole process, okay, who is responsible to do this? Then if I get here, okay, my PR was rejected. Okay, I know that I need to do some stuff. Okay, who is supposed to reopen the PR? Me, the author, or I should ask the steward, hey, could you reopen so I can, do the fixes? So in the process, for me, it was not clear.
it sounds like if we say that the same RFC may be reopened by any maintainer or team lead, then would you like to comment that in there or add that suggestion?
Yeah, I can do that. Yes,
because that would then just stop the unlikely but scenario where there's a vexatious author reopening their PR after the team lead closes it and ad infinitum.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Juan. And that suggests then if we got Terrence's suggestion, if we got Juan's suggestion, then everybody else seems to be happy with things.
I mean, I have more comments. Sorry, Aiden.
That's fine. Let's go.
In the voting thing, Sam made some comment about, can we set a minimum time period for the window? And then I noticed he then marked it resolved. Where no minimum time window was set, besides kind of best judgment to prescribe a length that in good faith ensures all interested parties get a chance to vote. I guess those two kind of feel at odds of just not setting a minimum time window and just saying leave it up kind of to, I guess, the person who's making the call for votes.
What's the concern, Terrence? That a team lead or whoever's initiating the vote would set too short a time, and therefore the lazy consensus would just railroad through rather than be considered.
Yeah, I guess so. That or I think setting a minimum or guidance just probably makes it easier on the person who's making the call for votes to just probably default to it of just like not having to, like, how do you know when, because you can't edit the RFC, right? So it's just,
Mhm.
it kind of freezes everything. So it's like, what is a reasonable time window? And maybe for like project versus team RFCs, this is different because the
Scope. Yeah.
scope is different, and then potentially you're like working with those people day in, day out, right? Like if you're working on your own team, maybe you are talking about that, you've been talking about this RFC like every kind of, you know, team sync meeting, and so there is already a ton of consensus. But there is like, to some degree, like if all the binding votes are kind of done, you can close it early and accept it. So I mean, if there is already that consensus on the team, then is there really that much fear for having him in window? I don't know.
I added a suggestion. I don't know how we feel about it. I think it's like, it's good to just have it be guidance. But to include it here will at least give, you know, some direction. I'm gonna unresolve Sam's conversation so that you can see where it came from.
Okay, so NATV has added a sentence saying that a minimum time period of a week, unless all the binding votes are cast, is a good guideline. Cool. Joe, are you happy with this? Is this where you wanted it to be?
Yeah, I gave it my approval. I have a couple of suggestions outstanding, so if anybody else wants to merge those, go for it. But I'm happy as is. And I added a sentence to the implementation section just to keep it covered, and we can add more. We can leave it. I'm fine with it the way it is.
Yeah, so Joe's added the sentence, after the RFC has been accepted, any team or individual may begin implementing the changes it defines. I think that's reasonable because it agrees with the rest of the document. So I will accept that suggestion unless anybody wants to shout at me. In fact, Joe, I'll leave it to Emily to accept the suggestion because it's her RFC. But
Yeah.
I mean, that's only
I mean-
if you're following the RFC process that says that only the author should be allowed to edit it, which has not been accepted yet. So
I know, I just feel bad and committing things to other people's stuff, but all the suggestions look reasonable to me. I think Natalie's suggestion deals with Terrence's question reasonably. And Juan said he was adding a suggestion about the who can reopen things. And yeah, it looks like we're in a stage that we have more than rough consensus or lazy consensus on this. There's a lot of good detail here. And if Emily then accepts all these changes, I suspect we're in endgame.
for acceptance voting, in the weird edge case that no votes are cast in that time window, what do we do?
That is a weird edge case where the steward has to convince the team lead that, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think the more reasonable one is probably like the steward is the team lead, assuming that other change doesn't come through, right? In a project level 1 and maybe people are out on vacation, or whatever, right? Like not intentionally like stonewalling the thing. Some work crisis came up, like I feel like it's given the state of I think maybe company diversity right now and things, like it's not, I think, unreasonable.
So do you want to say that at least the steward, no, we can't. The whole point of the lazy consensus is to allow things to go forward.
Right, but I think that when we said that, it was like it required at least one vote, like one yes vote, right, to come through. And I guess that was like the point I was making here, is that like I think that is missing here.
Okay.
That, and if no votes come in, like I guess like either we extend it or something, right? And then after that extension of nothing, then I guess it closes, right?
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I accept what you're saying. It does sound like we're putting in a lot. I'm trying to think. Is there a straightforward way of dealing with this? Yeah. So what happens if there is quite literally just an invalid vote because no one has voted? Then can we just say something like we repeat the call for votes procedure?
Sure.
Right.
That seemed like
Can
a
I add that
reasonable suggestion.
Yeah. Do you want to add that suggestion, Terence?
Sure.
Is someone adding a suggestion? Because if not, I can add it.
I was adding it, but if you want
No.
to wordsmith over me, I am okay with that too.
No, sorry. I just wasn't, I was just making sure someone was gonna make a suggestion so that we don't lose the value of this conversation.
Fantastic. Right. So given that we still have, 7 people in here who definitely understand control flow diagrams and if statements, are there any obvious other weird and wonderful edge cases that we should close off at this stage? Sweet. You happy, Joe? Oh, Terence, go for it.
I guess it talks about a little bit for like finding stewards. Is there like a regular place this happens?
Sorry, run that one by me again.
For finding steward, it talks about like who can kind of be a steward and how they kind of belong to a team or like within the own team thing. Is this just like, I may have missed something, but it doesn't really talk about like how you actually find one. Like, I think it talks about like kind of the criteria and kind of where they go, but like, is there a process for how RFCs get assigned to a steward? Is it up to team leads to kind of take that initiative on their own? It talks about like on the bandwidth part of it too, like if it doesn't get assigned, but like, is there a place where this happens, or?
Ideally, how would you see this happen? Just somebody posting our Slack, hey, I need, or how has this happened for external parties? I think typically we would have somebody that says, hey, I really want this feature. And then we would ask them to create an RFC. And then at that point, they're already talking to somebody. So I guess right now it's very organic. I don't know that it's working. Is there an alternative that you could see, Terrence?
I mean, it could be a, like, do we want it to be part of one of our working group things where we either look at RFCs or close them, or kind of see if people are interested? Is it up to kind of stewards to just be proactive about, I guess for project level, it's like up to team leads probably more so. I imagine for team RFCs, you have more visibility on your own team, one would hope, of team RFCs being brought up, but kind of now that we've done away with the RFC review process, right? Like, I think there's a higher chance that it kind of just puts a lot more onus, I think, on potential stewards to be very proactive about looking at them, or it's very easy for RFCs, I guess, to languish.
I feel like we've already sort of been doing something like this informally in the team lead sync. Like, I can recall that the last few weeks, if there was an RFC that I was aware of that, you know, I didn't like, example being the additional OCI artifacts one, right? Like, I had taken a look at it, but it wasn't really my wheelhouse. However, I wanted to make sure other people knew about it. Like, I think that meeting, that team lead meeting, is a good forum to surface that. It's like, you could just make it a standing agenda item to like see if there are any RFCs that need a steward, any new ones that need a steward, and like just
Yeah, I that makes sense to me. I just didn't want it to be like Nallie's the one that reads the RFCs and then she brought it to the team lead meeting as like this kind of, you know, like someone's doing this thing, kind of thing. Like, would that have been brought up if you did not look at it? Probably not, right?
Well, if we had an agenda item that was just like, check for new RFCs, you know, there are not so many that at this point we wouldn't be able to just open it, and like, ideally, most of them would already have been looked at, like either assigned a steward or closed because no one's interested in stewarding it, right? So there should be a small number that don't have. I suggested a new label for status, like steward assigned, or I you know, something like, okay, just look for ones that don't have that label, and it should be a pretty, you know, a pretty quick process to just see them and briefly discuss.
Yep, that sounds good to me. I just want to make sure that it was a thing we were proactively doing versus, or I would prefer it was proactive versus organically, like someone was making sure it was happening, and then if that someone went on vacation or, you know, whatever, it would kind of languish.
So is it sufficient then, Terence, if I add that as a standing item to this meeting?
So sorry, Aiden,
Yep, sorry.
before we go to that, I guess the one thing I was going to comment is I'm not sure that I want to be very specific in the RFC, or I don't think it'd be ideal to be very specific in the RFC as to the process of how a steward comes to be. But to your point, Terrence, I think we do have to be clear on whose responsibility it is to attribute stewards, right? Is it the person, the author of the RFC, is it team leads or whatever, right? So I think the solution that Natalie brought up, I think, is a really good one. So that would be to team lead sync, but I wouldn't want to, you know, scribe that into the RFC. So what if we just said that, the leadership, I don't know if we use that term already, but basically leadership is the one that sets, is responsible for setting a steward. And if there's no steward available at that time, right, then at least they're responsible for sort of more or less softly rejecting the RFC due to the lack of bandwidth. But I think we have to give the author sort of a, hey, this is the person that's going to help you run with it, or this is something that we like but cannot take on at this point in time.
Cool. So the choosing assignment, or I'm sure Aussie, there must be a cooler name for that. You know, you come for a constitutional monarchy. There's got to be a much investing of a steward. Then is we need to add that to as a standing item to our meeting. Javier, you don't see the need to add any more detail into the RFC about investing a steward. Is that correct?
I think right now the RFC doesn't spell out
The onus of who that it belongs to kind of make that happen.
Mhm.
that's the only, basically 1 or 2 sentences I would add, right? Is TOC members or team leads are responsible for assigning a steward, or notifying to the author that no assignee can be made at this time for whatever the reason may be.
Great. Can you please add that suggestion?
I will do that. Yep.
I still think it's worth
That-
calling
that-
out Natalie's suggestion, even if it's not written in the RFC, as a comment, as like, this is how we'll attempt to try it.
Fantastic. Okay. I have to drop, I'm afraid, for the fantastic reason that we're getting a new team member, and I have to go and see them. But
Congratulations.
thank you very much. It sounds like we're near the end of this process. Probably again, but it sounds like we're definitely getting further towards the end.
Yep. Well, I'll ping Emily, and I think we need to figure out what to do with Steven's vote. But yeah, thanks everybody.